Hello AP Biology students, we're going to go over the 7th section in Unit 5. And just a little bit of a warning, I did separate some sections here now that I'm re-going through this content. What I did was I moved sex-linked genetics before non-Mendelian genetics, even though it's a part of non-Mendelian genetics. I also separated blood genetics from non-Mendelian genetics, even though it's a part of it. The reason why I reshuffled and separated some sections here is non-Mendelian genetics was just too big. And I kind of like sex-linked genetics being right after the autosomal genetic disorders that I cover. So that being said, let's just get into the content here. Remember that sex chromosomes are the 23rd pair of chromosomes that determine the sex of an individual. And typically, females are XX and males are XY. Looking at the amount of genes on each of these chromosomes, there's around 1,500 genes on the X chromosome, while the Y chromosome only has around 80. If you look at our Punnett square here, you can see the male has an XY chromosome combination, while the female here has an XX. Now, as you can see in our Punnett square here, the male kind of decides the sex of the offspring. Now, I'm not really meaning deciding. It's not like they're actually choosing what chromosome is being passed on. Remember, through meiosis, we're going to produce half of the sperm cells with a Y chromosome and half of the other sperm cells with an X chromosome. And it's just random chance what the zygote is going to inherit, whether it be a Y chromosome in the sperm or the X chromosome. Now, any gene that's on one of these sex chromosomes is going to be called a sex-linked gene. And just by the amount of genes located on that X chromosome, most of the sex-linked genes are on the X chromosome. Again, just because there are just more genes in general on that X chromosome, 1,500 compared to about 80. Now, in a sex-linked or X-linked recessive disorder, males are only going to need one copy of the X-linked disorder, while females need two. As you can see on the left-hand side here, affected males only need one of the X chromosomes with the recessive gene in order to be affected. This is because, again, they only have one X chromosome. So as long as they get one of the X chromosomes with the recessive gene, they're going to have this disorder. Females, on the other hand, need two of these genes. You can see, again, the affected female here is XH, XH. This is because as long as a female inherits at least one of these X's with a big H or a dominant letter H, they're not going to have that disorder. They can be a carrier, which is an individual that has, again, one of these genes, but not both. Males, on the other hand, only have one X chromosome. Remember, they're XY. So if they have a X with a big H, they're not going to have the disorder. They're not going to be affected. They're unaffected. Unaffected females in this type of inheritance have two X big H chromosomes. Now, like I said before, a carrier is just an individual who has one copy of a gene but doesn't have the disorder. And we typically only see these in the recessive disorders, since when we talk about the dominant disorders, as long as you inherit one, you have the disorder. And just like I said, sex-linked dominant disorders occur when the X chromosome has a dominant gene attached. As you can see here, affected males only have one X chromosome, but if that X chromosome has that dominant gene, they're going to be affected. In this case, females, again, only need one of these X chromosomes with the dominant letter H. So again, if they have two, they're affected, and if they have one, they're affected. Y-linked disorders only occur in males. This is because typically females don't have that Y chromosome. They are XX. So again, only males are going to inherit these disorders since they're going to pass that Y chromosome from father to son. Now, these are really unlikely just because, again, only males can inherit them. And if they are a deadly disorder, if they're passed on 100% of the time to the male offspring, it's just going to lessen the likelihood that this Y chromosome disorder is going to be inherited. Just as an end note for this section, I'm not going to go over any specific examples of these types of Punnett squares that we make for sex-linked genetics. The only reason is because I've already made tons of TikToks about these inheritance patterns and the Punnett squares that we use to predict the offspring. So if you want to have some practice with these Punnett squares, just look at my other videos because I have tons of examples that you can go through.